January 2, 1942. Less than a month after Pearl Harbor, the order was signed. It activated the 8th Air Force. This was not merely a military formality. It was the genesis of a force that would fundamentally redefine the nature of modern warfare. The path to this moment was paved by decades of evolving doctrine. Figures like Italian air power theorist Giulio Douhet had championed the idea of strategic bombing, envisioning heavy bombers as virtually invincible, able to strike deep into enemy territory and cripple war-making capacity. This pre-war optimism was reinforced by early American theorists like Harold L. George and Robert M. Webster, who analyzed the vulnerability of cities like New York to daylight bombing. Brigadier General William Billy Mitchell, an early advocate for military aviation, had long predicted the offensive and defensive power of long-range aircraft. The prevailing wisdom was clear: the bomber will always get through. This dogma, while inspiring, would soon be tested against the brutal realities of a global conflict. When the United States entered World War II on December 7, 1941, its air arm, renamed the USAAF in June 1941, was modest. It possessed just over 1,000 aircraft, only around 700 of which were bombers. Yet, the agreement between President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill prioritized the defeat of Germany. This decision instantly elevated the 8th Air Force to a principal, indispensable force for European operations. By mid-1942, the first B-17 flying fortresses were dispatched to England. These were not simply aircraft, they were the tangible embodiment of a strategic vision. The B-17, initially a Boeing Model 299 design from 1935, was a streamlined four-engined behemoth, believed to be impregnable in the face of enemy fire. Brigadier General Irasci's enemy, Ika, was designated Commanding General of 8th Bomber Command, tasked with preparing airfields and studying RAF methods. He arrived with a small contingent in England, the first air cruise following on May 11, 1942. On July 4, 1942, the 8th Air Force conducted its first operation. A combined Anglo-American mission bombing Luftwaffe airfields in Holland. By August, the B-17E commenced full operations. The logistics alone were monumental. Britain's Air Ministry had 54 bomber bases under construction for the 8th Air Force by June 1943. Ultimately, 67 airfields would be utilised across England's home counties and East Anglia, each requiring massive civil engineering. 500,000 square yards of concrete, 400,000 cubic yards of excavated soil, and the removal of 8 miles of hedgerow and 1,500 trees. These were self-contained communities designed to house 2,500 personnel for a heavy bomb group or 1,200 for a fighter group. As the bomber force arrived, so too did its fighter escort. Late June 1942 saw the arrival of the 31st Fighter Group in England, followed in September by the transfer of the RAF's Eagle squadrons to form the 4th Fighter Group, flying Spitfires. Early combat encounters, however, quickly exposed the stark contrast between pre-war assumptions and battlefield realities. The German Focke-Wulf 190, introduced in late 1941, was a pugnacious, radial-engined fighter. It, alongside the Messerschmitt Bf 109F, posed a formidable and initially underestimated threat to Allied bombers. The early B-17E, with its Bendix ventral turret, proved to have defensive weaknesses. Japanese pilots, for example, exploited head-on attacks against its limited forward armament. The drag from its turrets and tail assembly also reduced top speed. On October 9, 1942, the 8th Air Force mounted its first large-scale mission to Lille, France, with 108 heavy bombers, including 24 B-24 Liberators. The initial Luftwaffe resistance was a grim harbinger. On average, losses in 1942 stood at 4.5% per mission. By the second quarter of 1943, this had risen to 7.6%. The bomber invincibility myth was being tragically debunked. Units like the 303rd Bomb Group, Hell's Angels, activated in February 1942, were among the pioneers. Their initial mission on November 17, 1942, targeting Saint-Nazaire, was aborted due to cloud cover. But by January 1943, they were leading attacks against Flak City, Saint Flak City, Nazaire, losing 4 aircraft in the process. Casualties among bomber crews were the heaviest of any arm of service during World War II. It is estimated that only 27% of flight crews survived their tours, with an average of just 8 missions before being shot down. The term safe for airmen on the ground was deeply misleading. For every man in the air, 4 were required on the ground to keep aircraft flying. Burtonwood, the single largest U.S. supply, storage, and maintenance installation, had over 35,000 men under its control. Between 1943 and 1945, over 11,500 aircraft were processed through its facilities. By the end of 1943, the 8th Air Force had 50 mobile repair units in operation, responding to the 588 battle-damaged aircraft between October 1942 and March 1943 alone. These unseen crews, working around the clock, were the bedrock of the entire operation. The operational reality for ground crews, like the 3rd Station Complement at Molesworth, was to make the base livable. This involved everything from the primitive RAF biscuit mattresses to securing fuel, providing laundry through units like the 11014th Quartermaster Company, and ensuring safety. The 2097th Engineers Firefighting Platoon took over firefighting duties at Molesworth from the British in 1944, a quiet indicator of the growing American footprint. Airmen themselves faced immense psychological strain. Beneath outward calm, deep dread and anxiety were common. Bombardier Bob Gilman recalled the rising tension upon entering enemy territory. Flak, he said, would initially appear as deceptive storm clouds. Sergeant Ben Smith admitted to maintaining a facade of joviality and hot pilot bravado. At altitudes of 20,000 feet and above, where B-17s typically flew between 24,000 and 27,000 feet, oxygen was paramount. Insufficient supply would lead to unconsciousness and death within 20 minutes, often without the victim even realizing it. Heated flying suits controlled by rheostats were essential to combat the extreme cold. Navigation was primarily by dead reckoning, supplemented by wireless telegraphy and short-range radio telephones. Bombardiers removed safety pins from ordnance at lower altitudes to prevent freezing. Air gunners communicated enemy approaches by clock positions, such as Bandit at 1 o'clock high. The B-24 Liberator, though less celebrated than the B-17, played a critical role. Its genesis stemmed from a USAAC requirement in January 1939 for a bomber capable of 310 miles per hour, a 30,000 so-foot ceiling, and a 4-ton bomb load up to 3,000 miles. Consolidated's Davis aerofoil was key to its design, promising high lift and long range. The XB-24 prototype flew on December 29, 1939. However, the B-24 also had its limitations. Its narrow nose, with only a single .50 caliber gun, created a vulnerable blind spot. It was also less stable above 20,000 feet, hindering effective close formations. These factors, along with different performance characteristics from the B-17, made combined operations difficult. In 1943, the 8th Air Force struggled to achieve its strategic bombing objectives. A significant transfer of bomber squadrons to the Mediterranean theater diluted its strength. By April, there were only 264 heavy bombers and 172 escort fighters in England. The initial fighter escorts, Spitfires, and early P-47 Thunderbolts had limited range, forcing them to return before bombers reached their deep targets. The P-47, while capable, was initially lame and sluggish near ground level, struggling with acceleration against the F-190. Its strength lay above 25,000 feet and in dives, a characteristic that demanded new tactics. General Franco Del Hunter, leader of 8th Fighter Command, with limited fighter experience, struggled with early operational plans. On an April 27th, suffered losses to 47s, suffered losses to 490s, prompting tactical changes. Colonel Hub Zemke, an inspirational leader of the 56th Fighter Group, developed staggered formations and dive and zoom tactics to exploit the P-47's strengths. Operation Point Blank, initiated in the summer of 1943, shifted the strategic bombing campaign's focus to destroying the Luftwaffe. It was a crucial escalation, but the USAAF's focus on industrial targets, coupled with the Luftwaffe's reinforcement of its fighter strength, led to unsustainable losses. inflated kill claims by bomber gunners further masked the true vulnerability. One mission, for instance, claimed 56 destroyed German aircraft when only one was actually lost. This false belief in their effectiveness delayed critical tactical adjustments. The Schweinfurt-Regensburg raids of August 17, 1943, were a brutal turning point. 367 B-17 embarked on a combined attack. The 139 B-17s of the Regensburg raid lost 14 aircraft, while the first wing lost 36 B-17s on the Schweinfurt raid. The unescorted 3rd Combat Wing on the Regensburg mission suffered devastating losses. The German air defense network, with fighters like the BFR 109G6 armed with 13mm machine guns and 20mm cannon, and the introduction of the 21 cm Board Rakete rocket in late 1943, proved incredibly effective. These rockets were designed to break up bomber formations from beyond the range of their defensive guns. Then came the second Schweinfurt raid on October 14, 1943. Out of 291 B-17s launched, 60 were destroyed by the Luftwaffe, with 17 more scrapped due to damage. This mission, a harrowing 4-hour ordeal for 231 B-17 crews, served as a final PRCCA, crushing blow to the doctrine of self-defending bombers and unescorted deep penetration raids. The USAAF's foundational doctrine was, by the end of 1943, effectively dead. The human cost was immense. Only about 25% of 8th Air Force bomber crewmen completed their 25 mission tours in 1943. The bloody 100th Bomb Group, for example, suffered devastating losses on such missions. This strategic crisis demanded a fundamental shift. In late 1943, General Hap Arnold, commanding general of the USAAF, ordered the prioritization of P-38 and P-51 production for the 8th Air Force. This commitment to long-range escort fighters was critical. The P-47, through ingenious adaptation, began to overcome its range limitations. May 1939 saw General Arnold forbidding external fuel tanks due to fire concerns. But by February 1942, he authorized their development. Initially, unpressurized paper bathtub tanks were unreliable, but by September 1943, British-made 108-gallon steel and paper tanks were operational. The P-47's combat radius grew from approximately 230 miles to 475 miles, with larger drop tanks. The P-38 Lightning, while fast and heavily armed, proved a disappointment in the escort role due to engine reliability issues at high altitudes and mediocre combat performance. Colonel Hubert Zemke criticized its mechanical troubles, frail construction, and low survivability. However, the P-38J, with its improved chin radiators and increased fuel capacity, offered a vital performance upgrade. The true game-changer was the P-51 Mustang. Its genesis lay in a British requirement in April 1940 for a new long-range fighter. North American Aviation, instead of license-producing the P-40, proposed an entirely new design. The NA-73X prototype was assembled in a remarkable 117 days. Initial P-51 models, with Allison engines, performed well at low to medium altitudes, but struggled above 11,300 feet. It was the integration of the British-designed, license-built Packard Merlin engine into the P-51B that transformed it. With a top speed of 439 miles per hour at 25,000 feet, and a range capable of 300 miles from base and back, the Merlin-powered Mustang was the most satisfactory solution for escort. Major General William Kepner, commander of 8th Fighter Command, advocated for switching P-51B squadrons to the 8th. By September 1943, the first P-51B squadrons arrived. Lieutenant General James Doolittle, who took command of the 8th Air Force in January 1944, decisively shifted fighter doctrine. His directive was unambiguous: prioritize destroying German fighters over simply protecting bombers. The mission of the 8th Fighter Command, he declared, was to destroy the German Air Force. This new aggressive strategy unleashed Allied fighters. They moved from close escort to free-ranging hunts for German fighters. The P-51D, with its bubble canopy and 6.50 caliber machine guns, further improved visibility and combat effectiveness. By March 1944, 4 Mustang fighter groups achieved a kill rate of 13 enemy aircraft per 100 sorties, significantly higher than P-38 and P-47s. February 1944 saw the initiation of Operation Argument, dubbed Big Week, concentrated offensive against the German aircraft industry and day fighters. It involved approximately 3,800 bomber sorties and 10,000 tons of bombs dropped by the 8th and 15th Air Forces. Allied bomber losses were 226 B-17s and B-24s, about 6%. But Luftwaffe losses were severe, about 145 aircraft and 122 crew killed, with 44 wounded. On March 3, 1944, the 4th Fighter Group, now flying Mustangs, made its first mission to Berlin. 9 P-51s engaged 64 190s and Bf-110s, a testament to their newfound confidence and capability. The 4th Fighter Group would ultimately score more victories, 550 aerial, 461 ground, than any other 8 Air Force unit. The impact on the Luftwaffe was devastating. Their single-engine fighter force losses rose dramatically, from 1,052 in the last quarter of 1943 to 2,180 in Q1 1944 and over 3,000 in Q2 and Q3 1944. German claims of increasing fighter production masked a critical reality. Their operational strength, and particularly their pilot experience, was in severe decline. By July 1944, the majority of German pilots had been in combat for only 8 to 30 days. This attrition opened the door for the oil plan, advocated by Lieutenant General Karl Spades. Beginning May 12, 1944, key attacks on German hydrogenation plants proved devastating. By mid-June 1944, German synthetic fuel capacity was estimated to have been reduced from 1,200,000 tons per month to 670,000 tons. This plan, a vital turning point, directly hindered German fuel production and operational capacity. By D-Day, June 6, the Brown, 1944, the Allies had achieved overwhelming air superiority. Approximately 13,700 Allied sorties were flown, overwhelming the paltry forces of Luftwaffe III. While Luftwaffe III claimed to shoot down 24 Allied aircraft, the Allies lost around 130 to all causes, and actual Luftwaffe fighter losses were just 16. It took Luftwaffe III 3 weeks to match the sortie numbers conducted by the Allies on D-Day alone. As Allied air superiority solidified, the nature of the threat to bombers shifted. From December 1942 to April 1945, German gunners damaged 54,539 8 Air Force flying fortresses and liberators. By mid-1944, flak accounted for about two-thirds of the 700 bombers lost and 98% of the 13,000 bombers damaged. The number of heavy flak guns in German-occupied territories reached 13,500 by February 1944. Flak consumed 29% of the German weapons budget and 20% of the munitions budget in 1943. It ultimately became the primary cause of aircraft attrition. The Germans also developed new threats. The Messerschmitt Me 262, a jet-powered interceptor with 430mm K108 cannon and a top speed of 525 miles per hour, represented a significant technological leap. The first known loss of a heavy bomber to an Me 262 occurred on October 7, 1944. Allied fighters, like the P-51, had to drop external tanks to even attempt to catch them, severely impacting their range. The 357th Fighter Group claimed 19 Me 262 kills, the highest of any 8th Air Force group. The Messerschmitt Me 163,8, a rocket-powered fighter, reached 560 miles per hour, but had only about 4 minutes of engine running time. 80% of its losses resulted from accidents during takeoff and landings. The aerial war over Europe was a brutal, evolving struggle. The 8th Air Force reached its peak strength by January 1945, over 200,000 officers and men, with 40.5 heavy bomb groups and 15 fighter groups. A typical mission involved 1,400 heavy bombers, escorted by 800 fighters, consuming 3.5 million gallons of aviation gasoline and dropping 3,300 tons of bombs. The final, devastating phase of the offensive saw widespread bombing of German cities like Dresden, and Chemnitz in early 1945. Operation Clarion, on February 22, 1945, saw over 6,000 Allied aircraft strike transportation targets, aiming to prevent troop movements to the Eastern Front. Germany was systematically reduced to rubble. On April 16, 1945, General Spaetz announced the end of the strategic mission. The Third Reich's ability to continue the war had been crippled. On April 25, 1945, the 8th Air Force flew its last mission. The war in Europe concluded on May 8, 1945. The strategic air offensive is credited with having ultimately broken the Third Reich. Its industries were pulverized, its transport system paralyzed, and its armies decisively smashed. The cost, however, was immense. 10,000 American bombers fell in battle. Thousands more airmen were lost. Yet, the 8th Air Force emerged as one of the most effective fighting forces, achieving air superiority over Europe and demonstrating the transformative power of strategic air power, shaping military doctrine for generations to come. This doctrine found its earliest and most vocal champion in General Billy Mitchell. Mitchell, a staunch advocate for air power, believed in its decisive role in modern warfare. His conviction was so profound that General Karl Spaatz, a key figure in the European air campaign, publicly defended him. This loyalty, however, came at a cost, leading to a 15-year stagnation in Spaetz's rank. Yet, Spaetz's vision would ultimately prevail. By May 1942, he commanded the nascent U.S. 8th Air Force. He became the prime mover behind the American air campaign in Europe. Early operations of the 8th Air Force began to define the combined bomber offensive. On August 17, 1942, the first successful daylight raid targeted Rouen, France. This mission involved 12 B-17 bombers, proving the potential of precision bombardment. Lieutenant General Ira C. Eaker took command of the 8th Air Force in December 1942. Eaker, who had co-authored books with Hap Arnold promoting the Army Air Corps, understood the immense challenge ahead. On January 27, 1943, the first mission to Germany launched, dispatching 91 bombers to Wilhelmshaven and Emden. This marked the first time over 200 bombers were sent on a single mission. However, early successes were hard-won and came with alarming losses. German air defenses, bolstered by advancements like the primitive Metox receiver, were evolving. The strategic imperative to achieve air superiority over Germany became glaringly apparent. The immense human toll on aircrews from both sides underscored the profound personal sacrifices. One critical morale boost came earlier. Far from Europe, on April 18, 1942, General James "Jimmy" Doolittle led the daring Doolittle raid on Japan. 16 modified B-25B Mitchells launched from the carrier Hornet for this audacious strike. Doolittle later commanded the 12th Air Force in North Africa, gaining crucial combat experience. The air war in Europe escalated, with crucial tests like the Schweinfurt-Regensburg mission in August 1943. This first shuttle mission on August 17, 1943, saw bombers striking deep into Germany. Despite the increasing scale, exemplified by over 5,000 tons of bombs dropped in September 1943, losses mounted. October 1943 saw a staggering 214 bombers lost on a single day, representing 9.2% of aircraft. These losses highlighted the critical technical flaw, the desperate need for long-range fighter escort. The period from April 1943 to June 1944 was defined by US AAA counter-air operations against the Luftwaffe. The realization of this need became a turning point. In the air war, Doolittle took command of the 8th Air Force in January 1944. By March 1944, Doolittle's shift in fighter focus was profound. Destroy the German Air Force. This tactical change transformed the air campaign, leading to the deployment of superior escort fighters. The P-51 Mustang, fitted with 75-gallon external tanks, became the premier long-range escort fighter. This was a decisive advantage, enabling fighters to accompany bombers all the way to their targets. Aces emerged from the fierce skies, reshaping the balance of power. Lieutenant Colonel Francis S. Gabreski, top-scoring Thunderbolt ace in the ETO, achieved 28 victories. Gabreski, who had witnessed the Pearl Harbor raid on December 7, 1941, flew 153 missions, often in P-47 Thunderbolts. Robert Samuel Johnson, flying his P-47, became an ace on October 10, 1943. Johnson, the second highest-scoring American ace in the ETO, amassed 27 confirmed kills in 91 missions. George Earl Ratsey Preddy Jr., the top-scoring Mustang ace, achieved 26 3/4 confirmed kills. Preddy downed 6 Bf-109s on August 6, 1944, showcasing the Mustang's dominance. Lieutenant Colonel John Charles Meyer scored 26 confirmed victories, flying P-51s. Meyer also downed the first R-234 jet bomber, a testament to Allied air superiority. Hubert "Hub" Zemke's Wolfpack was another formidable ace. The focus on destroying the Luftwaffe paved the way for massive bomber efforts. On March 5, 1944, Spaatz presented his oil plan to Eisenhower, targeting Germany's fuel supply. In March 1944, over 20,000 tons of bombs were dropped, signaling an escalation. May 7, 1944, saw the first mission exceeding over 1,000 bombers. The summer of 1944 brought intense bombing of oil targets, crippling the German war machine. June 6, 1944, D-Day, saw extensive bomber and fighter operations, with 4,778 tons of bombs dropped. Colonel Kermit D. Stevens, commanding the 303rd Bomb Group, H, led many successful missions to Germany. Sergeant Frank Garrett, a ball turret gunner on the B-17F Knockout Dropper, participated in raids like Le Bourget Airfield. Brigadier General Haywood S. Hansell commanded the 1st Bomb Wing, overseeing key operations. Major General Earl E. Partridge served as Deputy Commander of 8th Air Force, commanding the 3rd Bomb Division. The sheer scale of the air war continued to grow exponentially. On December 24, 1944, the largest bomber mission to date saw 2,055 bombers in the air. They attacked the Ardennes Bulge sector, dropping 4,302 tons of bombs. January 1945 represented the greatest aircraft strength, with 2,799 bombers and 1,484 fighters assigned. Fighters achieved peak claims on January 14, 1945, destroying 161 enemy aircraft in one day. The combined bomber offensive, particularly Operation Point Blank, inflicted immense damage on German industry. The total bomb tonnage on Greater Berlin, the most heavily bombed U.S. target, reached 27,985 tons. March 1945 saw the greatest bomber effort for any month, with 31,297 bombers sorted. An astonishing 73,878 tons of bombs were dropped in March 1945 alone. The last mission to Berlin occurred on March 28, 1945. On that day, fighters destroyed 752 enemy aircraft in one operation, a testament to Allied dominance. The strategic air campaign had achieved its objective.